Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ched Talks. Tonight, Ched Talks is brought to you by Hookshot Media Productions, always at our side to ensure that Ched Talks is live, we look good, and that our guests look even better. Tonight on Ched Talks, I have a remarkable guest. I'm so thrilled to have this woman on. She is someone that started out her life with some challenges like most of us, but went on to be a spectacular Navy officer. So without further ado, I'm going to tell you a little bit more. I'm going to bring her in and have her tell her story and tell her all about herself. So welcome to the stage, Teresa Carpenter.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, it was my pleasure to have you on tonight. I even messed up some of my intro, but it's all good. I have all love. I have all love from my audience. They know that my show is about resilience. It's about the people that come on here. You always share your journey and try to bring not only your journey, but you try to show people how through your resilience, things happen for you and how it brought you to where you are today. And it's also an opportunity for people to see that there's so much beyond just what's in front of their eyes. Oftentimes people are not sure where their journey could lead them and not understand the opportunities that you may have. So without further ado, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about you, where you grew up, how you grew up. Tell us, start right from the beginning.
All right. So I was born in Columbus, Ohio. So I'm from the Midwest. I was adopted about 2 months after I was born. I was given up for adoption, and I was raised in a middle class family, raised in the Catholic Church as well. So faith was always an important part of my childhood. I had one older brother. His name's Michael. He is 3.5 years older than myself, and it was a good place to grow up for the most part. I lived in Clintonville, which is now somewhat of a trendy neighborhood, which is kind of astounding to me that it's become that. It's to me just kind of a simple, small town, but big in one way, and that is it's the Buckeye State. So it's from Ohio State University. Campus is just about 10 minutes away from my house. So that played a big part of my childhood. My grade school, Our Lady of Peace, we even had a scarlet and gray day where one day we wouldn't wear our uniform, and on Friday we would wear scarlet and gray colors to support our OSU Buckeyes. So that was a big thing growing up. But I joined the Navy after high school. I went off to a Catholic high school, Bishop Watterson. I guess I'll back up there. Was in the Flag Corps, and then had a little problems at home with my mom and dad. Decided I wanted to be on my own, and I moved out of my parents' house at the age of 16. So
16.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. That's incredible. So go back a little bit. So before you moved out, what drove you? I mean, what kind of things, what kind of challenges did you have? We talked earlier and you said, sometimes you had a difficult time with bullying and things like that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I kind of thought that the grass was always greener. I grew up, not wanting to be at my Catholic school because I grew up with a lot of insecurities, a lot of just kind of low self-esteem. And I think kids, pick up on that a lot. They can tell when someone doesn't have a lot of confidence. And I was picked on mercilessly at certain points in certain grades more than others. Every now and again, I would have a best friend, and that best friend would kind of buoy some of the cruelty. But I was just very unhappy in school, and it definitely distracted me, I think, from really taking what that kind of experience could have been because of just my personal interactions. And so I begged my parents to go to public school. And I thought like life was going to be so much better at the public school. And that was around the time I was, spending a lot of time with my girlfriends. I was going out a lot. I was just kind of hanging out, and an agreement was reached with my mom and dad that my senior year in high school, they would pay my rent. I would pay my utilities.
Right.
So I started working when I was about 14,
Wow.
and and I had a lot of jobs. And so I balanced it all because I wanted my own money and I wanted to be able to make decisions for myself. I was very independent, fiercely independent,
Hmm.
because it was like that was the one thing I felt like I could do. You know, I wasn't always able to get along with everyone, and certain people may not have cared for me, but I could make my own money and I could make
Right.
my own decisions with my own money. And so at around that time, it was sort of like, well, I was button heads with my mom a little bit, and they decided, and I decided, it was a mutual agreement that I was going to live on my own my senior year.
Right.
And so they pulled me out of Catholic school, and I started going to an inner city public school, which was all the way on the other side of town. And I didn't know a single person there. It was definitely not what I expected. And they were
Right.
behind educationally from where
Right.
I had been. Even though I didn't pay much attention in class, I knew enough to know my senior year, it was kind of a repeat of what I'd already learned my junior year. So
Right.
I went as much as I had to get a diploma, and that was about it. I mostly worked. I hung out with my friends. I went out a lot. I partied.
Right.
You know, did all the things that I think rebellious kids
A
do.
typical teenager would do. Right.
Except
Okay.
for work.
So, except what? Sorry.
Except for working, because I knew I had to earn money.
Okay, so the working, I guess, and that kind of gave you your independence and made you feel empowered in some way.
It did. It did. It gave me a
Okay.
sense of really the thing that it did is that, you know, being able to work and earn your own money, I think leads to you to being able to make your own decisions about what you're going
Right.
to do with your time and your life. And so
Mhm.
I felt like that was my ticket out of any situation, was if I could earn my way.
Right.
The challenge was figuring out what my skills were and what could not be menial or unfulfilling, because a lot of
Right.
those jobs that you're going to get right out of high school, they're going to be jobs that are really hard and very thankless. And I did that, you know, from about 14 to about 19.
Okay, so that's interesting. So I know a lot of kids and a lot of kids today. They struggle with what they're going to do with their lives, right? They even for second year university, they're still not sure. They sometimes it's a maturity thing, and sometimes it's just because there's so much uncertainty as to where you're gonna go, what you're taking, and what you take your first year sometimes may end up not what you like. So I see that there's a lot of indecision there. So now, I guess from there that's when you went to the Navy. What made you decide the Navy was the place for you? I mean, how did that come about as a career choice?
Right. So at this point, by the time I joined the Navy, I probably had something about, and I can remember because I had to list them all on my form. I think I had something about eight different jobs.
Wow.
And I was just bouncing. I was going from one job to another job, and nothing really seemed to fit. I mean, I folded clothes for a Burlington Coat Factory. I was a busser at a restaurant. I worked fast food at McDonald's. I was a hostess. I answered phones for Victoria's Secret catalog back when they used to have catalog, because Les Wexner Limited Stores is from Columbus. And I did another phone job that was somewhat similar. And so I felt like I just kind of there wasn't going to be anything that I was going to get without some kind of an education and without some sort of training. And I couldn't afford to go to college. I didn't have money for college. So I did try to take out a student loan and got into some debt with that and tried to go to school, but my priorities were still hanging out with my friends, the friends that hadn't gone off to college yet. And meanwhile, a lot of my friends were starting to go to school. So it's kind of just me left there. And I wasn't, I didn't have healthy relationship habits. So I didn't have the ability to find a really healthy partner at that time. So it was just kind of like, what do I do? How do I continue to make money and not go crazy with these jobs that I just know have no upward mobility? And I didn't see that these jobs would lead. I didn't think that I didn't have enough confidence in myself to see myself as a manager. And I didn't have enough confidence in myself to go find a lasting long-term relationship. So I had a couple friends who had been in the military. One was a reserve Marine. He was my roommate at the time. And then I had a guy that I was just kind of talking to who thought it was a good idea. And I had talked to him about it. And I didn't even really know what branch I wanted to go into. I just decided one day to visit a recruiter because I saw it as a place where I could probably earn a steady income. I was running out of money. I was in debt. And like I said, none of the jobs that I tried seemed like a good fit. And I thought this could give me an opportunity to travel. It would get me some new experiences that I hadn't had before. It would be adventurous,
So, I'm sorry. What age was that? You're saying at about 19? Yeah, but that's still quite forward thinking in understanding that, well, obviously maybe the travel part, but understanding that, this could offer you something more, an education, a way to kind of earn a decent living. How did that conversation go? Like, I mean, how did you process that? Because I'm sure a lot of people are stuck, and people have this misconception about what the Army or Navy or Air Force may be. They automatically think war, and there's fear, and obviously the family members join in and kind of have those. How do you process that, and who helps you to process that?
I really didn't have anyone that was helping me understand what this would mean because I'm not from a military town. So there wasn't a lot of people around me that understood what serving was or anything about the military. It was more just talking to the recruiters and getting a sense for what this would entail. I went into it very blind to what the time commitment was going to be. I think I thought I was going to do the reserves. And then it wasn't even until I was in MEPS that I understood that they were pushing me towards a full-time gig. But because I was very open and I wanted something that would give me some kind of purpose and meaning. And I was very fortunate that I had one of the recruiters who took the time to sit down and really talk to me. I think at first they didn't really know what to do with me because I didn't score very high on my ASVAB because I hadn't paid attention in school. I was so distracted. I had ADD. I was being bullied. I just wasn't a very good student. So there was a lot of skills that I missed in school. And so I scored something like a fifth, like one of the lowest scores you can possibly have to get into the Navy. And so at first, I don't even know if they were going to accept me. And I will never forget this. One chief pulled me aside and had this like heart to heart and this deep conversation about like, where do I see myself and what do I think I'm capable of? And we just talked and I felt safe sharing with him about my family and about where I was in life. And he's like, I went by Terry back then, Terry, I think we have a place for you in the Navy. So that's how I ended up as an aviation electrician's mate.
Someone's a very strong woman. You're trying to find your purpose in the world. Okay. So so they were able to help you navigate the thought process and go through that. But weren't you afraid that you might see action? I mean, like a lot of people, that's a fear, I would imagine, that, geez, what do I do then? Is that ever a concern?
No, I think I understood that that's part of being in the military, but the way it was explained to me is that I was going to be a maintainer. So I was going to fix aircraft. So I was going to learn a technical skill and I was going to go on a ship. And so understanding that the Navy, there is that potential that something could happen and we could be put in harm's way. But I'll be honest with you, Chedwick, I wasn't really thinking that. That's a great question. I wasn't thinking through those type of, a lot of people would, but no, I was more just thinking, gosh, can I even get through school? Like, will I pass this very, technical electrician's course and learn how to read a schematic and understand how to fix. I'd never turned a wrench before or repaired an electrical circuit, so I was just concerned if that was a skill I could even, do at that point.
Okay. So tell me then, okay, so you joined. What are some of the misconceptions in and around the Navy? Like, what are some of the things that people, you may hear people say that they have no clue and they're just like, talking, of things that they have no clue.
Well, I think that sometimes people don't understand that it's not all like action and super awesome stuff. It's a career like any other where it has its peaks and its valleys. I mean, you get to do some really exciting and some important work, but then there's sometimes where you're just waiting to go on a mission or you're back from a deployment and there's just a lot of downtime. So I don't think people understand that it ebbs and flows. Even people who've been in combat will tell you that. They'll go downrange and sit and sit and sit until something happens. So I think that's one of them. And then the other thing is the fact that you can't be a creative and be in the military. There's a lot of people who feel like you have to be just this one type of conforming kind of person. And, I've questioned authority my whole life, but I respect good leadership.
Right.
And they found a place for me in the military. So I think that, if those younger kids that are those creative nerds they can find a place in the military too. And their creativity is actually, I feel, an asset because they're the people that are going to think outside the box and have ideas that others may not.
Okay. I'm going to come back to that question, but before I wanted to ask you, so, you had this bullying in high school and some of the younger grades, and you said it led to some, self-confidence issues and all that. How did you combat that? And going into the Navy, how did it help to form and forge the character that and the person you became?
It made me more resilient because I can understand people's body language and their tone, and I'm very attuned to the way that somebody comes across. And even in my own self, I know that when my tone is a certain way, I'm very, very sensitive to it. And it was definitely something that I struggled with even in the military, because even once I got in the military, I saw that the same kind of bullying happens in workplaces as well. It really just got to a point where it was, it had been going on for so long that I had to just put my foot down and stand up to somebody and confront them. And then once I did, I saw that they backed down. They never admitted what they were doing, but they stopped the behavior. And I thought, wow, that's all it takes.
This works.
This works. Like, all I got to do is call them on it. And that I could have saved myself so much stress growing up if I had just called them on it and said something, or if I had, told a teacher or build a trusting relationship with somebody else who was in a position of power. There's just so many more strategies that I started to learn. It really culminated with this one girl. And sitting her down and describing exactly what she reminded me of. And I said, you remind me of those popular cheerleaders or kids growing up who wouldn't. Mean girls, basically. And I described what a mean girl was to her. And I said, I always wanted to be friends with people like you. And I always wanted people like you to like me. But when you won't make eye contact with me when you're talking to a group, or when you exclude me from certain things that you're doing and people, don't see it. I see what you're doing, and and it hurts me. And I want to know, what it is, what your issue is with me, blah, blah, blah. And she just denied it all and got defensive, but she was different towards me after that, and it taught me that, you really can stand up to somebody who's treating you unkindly.
That's huge.
Yeah,
that's huge. The ability to do that rather than just crack her a punch in the face. A lot of people, they don't exercise the emotional intelligence and the patience to be able to say, look, here's how you're making me feel, and here's what I think you're doing to others. And that's a big move, and it certainly is something that people could learn from. Right? Absolutely.
And they have to do it in steps. So you try to go to the person one-on-one and privately and resolve it. And then if they continue to, roll their eyes or say something under their breath every time you say something, even in a public meeting, I saw a guy do it to a girl at that same command. He said, what did you mean by that? What did you say something so-and-so? And sometimes you do that. And then what that does is it brings everybody else's attention to the fact
Right.
that this person's being disrespectful. And
Right.
you shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to just pull the person aside and resolve it one-on-one and try to handle it at the lowest level. But if you have to elevate it, you know what? If
Do what
it
you gotta do.
feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable for a couple seconds, so what? If the person will know they're on alert and that other people are watching the way they're treating somebody.
Right. Which brings me to another question: is how do you learn to draw, from someone who's being bullied, and obviously there was, this self-confidence thing, and when that incident happened and it elevated you, how do you learn to draw borders? And because you've always heard that people that have been bullied, they have difficulties with setting boundaries.
They do
Yeah.
have difficulties
Right.
with boundaries.
Yeah.
Well, I think that what I do now is I'm very attuned to someone's tone with me,
Right.
and I'm attuned to how they treat me and the things that they say. Because a lot of times when people want to bully you, they don't do it overtly. They do it very covertly with little
Right.
snide comments, or you'll be saying something and they won't, like, everybody else is kind of, doing the typical nonverbal stuff where they're looking at you and they're nodding. And then the person who doesn't like you or doesn't care for you is kind of like looking away.
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? They're just doing
Yeah.
things to make you know that they're not on your team.
Right.
And so you need to be attuned to that. That's
Mhm.
your emotional intelligence right there. Be
Mhm.
attuned to the people that aren't responding to you, and be okay with that, because you know what? Not everyone's going to like you. That's life.
Yeah.
As long as they're not disrespectful, and,
Right.
and as long as they're, you can work with somebody who doesn't like you, and you don't like them. You have to. I mean, that's part of, being an adult.
Mhm.
But I think that that's the way you draw those boundaries. Now, I'm not going to go sharing my, personal stories, or I'm not going to really be
Yeah.
me. I wouldn't say be me, because I'm always me, but I'm not, I'm not going to go out of my way to be overly friendly to
Right.
somebody that isn't going to respond or reciprocate. I'm wasting my time.
Right. Okay. I
So I
got you.
think that's how I set those boundaries. I limit my interactions with people who are toxic, or who I don't feel I can trust very much.
Right. Makes sense. So now it almost seems like a contradictory, or, I'm wondering how you were able to handle it. You said you were someone that always challenged authority,
Mhm.
and here you end up in the military.
Yes.
So I have to get back to that. That's what I'm saying. So how did you handle those situations where, they were, you got to do it this way, and
Mhm.
and how did you manage?
I find something good in every person I work for. So I find
That's
that
good.
common ground. So if I'm working for somebody who I don't 100% respect, or I don't like everything they do, but then again, you know what? There's probably a lot of people who worked for me who didn't like everything I did either. So
Yeah.
I'm very humble. So if
Mhm.
people, do things that I don't like, and I still have to work for them, or I still have to listen to them, I also know that that's my job. I signed on for this. So I believe this is my duty. My duty is to do as I'm told. And so that comes first. I don't necessarily like it. And, if it's somebody I don't respect. Now, when I get to work for an amazing leader, or somebody that just I'm really aligned with, it makes things a lot easier. Like right now, my boss and I are very philosophically aligned. Which is nice. We have a lot of the same opinions on things, but that doesn't always happen. And part of being a responsible adult as you get into the workforce is learning how to work with people that you don't agree with politically, you don't agree with maybe culturally, but maybe you can learn something from them. Maybe they have a perspective that you hadn't thought about.
Right. You touched something that's really important to me, and it's something that I've always tried to share and talk a little bit more about. It's about leadership. Now, obviously today, how people lead today is totally different than they used to lead in previous years. But I can't understand how it would be, how flexible leadership within the military is now as compared to several years back. I mean, it was very, one way. Now, and I know the larger institutions and obviously military, you have to align with that vision at all times. So you can't fray from what the aligned mission is. How do you, as a leader, get everyone on board? What are some of the tricks that, or some of the best practices that today's military leaders are using that transferable to everyday life?
I think that you have to empower people. I think that's the number one thing that you can do to be a good leader, is that you want people to do things for you, not because they have to, but because they don't want to let you down.
Right.
So if they don't want to let you down, that means that they believe in you and they see you as an example and somebody. So I think as a leader, you have to be the kind of leader that people want to be like. So like for me as a public affairs officer, I have to also not only be a good leader and a good strategic thinker, I feel I have to be a good tactician. I mean, that's why I podcast or I write blogs or I do all these other things that, aren't really expected for somebody at my level. But I believe that makes me a better example to my people, because they see that I'm out there and putting myself out there and learning these things. And I'm not perfect at them, but I want them to see that, I've taken pictures myself. I've done video editing. I've done a little bit of graphics, and I think that's part of it. They need to see that you are an example, and they need to see that you care about them and that you care about their welfare. Nothing means more to me than when someone, asks me about something that's going on in my personal life that they remember as a leader. So just getting to know, I mean, these are all just basic leadership skills that transfer to the corporate or the nonprofit world as well. It's knowing who your people are and genuinely caring about their welfare. Not saying, well, we all have to be in the suck, so you need to be in the suck with me.
Right.
I mean, there's a little bit of that goes on in the military that I'd like to see less of, where people think, oh, well, because I had to suffer, you should suffer too.
Right.
And I don't think that's a very helpful way to look at leadership. But I think generally the military, because of the challenges that we're put in front of, we tend to have to be very emotionally intelligent, and we have to be willing to be open to people's ideas, because if we're not, then people aren't going to want to follow us.
Right. That's for sure. And I certainly, I think giving a mission or a vision helps people to be aligned in the right. I think the younger generation are sometimes challenged because they need to know everything up front, right? They need authenticity. They need straightforward information, and sometimes that can always be the case. So selling them on a vision and empowering them to be part of that, I think, is always a great thing, and that's what you're sharing. And I thank you so much for that. And I hope people can take that away from here and know that, listen, I learned something tonight.
Yeah.
So you. Now you started out not being sure, a little bit self-confidence issues, barely passing the exam, and now you're an officer. How does that work? I thought people just get recruited and they just all of a sudden, if you're wearing a silver belt when you came in, you get to wear the silver belt for the rest of
That's one thing that's amazing about the Navy, is that you can join. I enlisted when I was 19, and now I've been in 25 years.
Yeah, you're 25.
25 years, and I'm putting on commander in September. So yes, you can advance through the system. And I didn't start off, in the job that I'm in today. I started fixing airplanes, and then I became a surface warfare officer, and now I'm a PAO. So you can also move around within the system. And that's the wonderful thing about it, is you meet all these amazing people, and they're doing all these different jobs. And you're like, well, how do I do that job? And so I had to just keep finding my way, because I didn't understand my skills. I didn't know that storytelling was going to be the calling that was going to be what how I found my passion and my purpose in the military.
Yeah.
I didn't know that when I joined. I had known that I was a good writer, and I thought maybe one day I might be a journalist or a social worker, but I didn't know that this was going to be like a thing I could do in the Navy. And it wasn't until kind of navigating my career and understanding more about what they offer that I understood that this could be a possibility. So it was a very slow process. It took me 10 years to get into the public affairs community. So 5-6 years enlisted as an AE, and then a year and a half, 2 years of SWO, and then some school in there. So it took me a little while, but what I love about the military is that they give you a set of instructions, and they say, you do these things, and then you do those things. And if you have the emotional intelligence as well, and you work hard, you will advance. And I think that in the corporate world or the nonprofit world, there's no guarantee about that, because your company could fold, the stock market could crash, your nonprofit doesn't get any donations. But with the military, it's the consistency that I was also drawn to. I saw that if I worked hard and I showed my value, there was going to be a reward or an incentive and an outcome. And I also saw that we could create cool stuff, and we could really be a part of something that was such an amazing opportunity, and something bigger than just something I could do by myself. So it really was just such an amazing and incredible opportunity. And you're like you said in the little teaser, it did help me build my confidence tremendously.
Yeah, it's amazing that someone and a lot of parents, I guess, would kind of direct their kids away from opportunities like that because they don't know. Right. I think what you're bringing here today, I think what you've kind of eloquently spelled out for us is that the options are there for people to pursue a brilliant career in the military. They can learn all kinds of things, get diplomas, degrees, and navigate what they would take forever in the corporate world to do. And in some cases, there are people that are entrepreneurs that could still learn a few lessons from some of the things that you're talking about today. So I really appreciate that. So now, if you were to be a recruiter, what would you say to young people that, that's a 17-year-old being bullied, trying to drop out of school, don't want to listen to authority?
Right. I would say you're going to just go travel all over the world. I don't know what the statistics are like on it, but yes, you might see combat or be in a hostile zone, but honestly, that's part of what it is, but it's not the huge part that everyone thinks it is. And I think that what the military spends a lot of time doing that a lot of people don't know, and it's all of our work with the State Department. We spend a lot of time preventing conflict instead of actually, being involved in conflict. All over the world, we're working with foreign militaries, and we're doing these exercises, and we have these cooperation agreements, and we work with we call partners and allies. And we're a part of just these amazing experiences where we're building capacity with one another. And, that to me, a lot of people don't understand that how closely we work with the embassies and other things like that. So I would tell that young person, you're going to have this amazing experience to travel all over the world and meet people from all walks of life. And they're going to change how you see the world. When you see Dubai, which is the most beautiful and just totally different culturally place that you've ever been, or the Philippines, or I'm just naming some of the places I've been, Indonesia, Japan. It's just so amazing to learn about other people's culture and how their family structures work, or, the way women are viewed in certain countries compared to ours. And I think that it makes you very grateful for what we have here, and how well our government, while it might not be perfect, we do live in a country where we all can vote, and we all do have a lot of privileges and accessibility to certain opportunities that people in other countries just don't have. And you know what? Those poor kids in these other countries, they have a lot of close familial ties. And they have a lot of, religious and faith-based organizations that I don't feel are as strong in the United States. So it's just interesting to go to these different places and say, oh man, I really love the way this country does this, or I love this, but ooh, I didn't like the way they treated their women, things like that. You'll just never get those experiences. And then the camaraderie that you get with your fellow, what we call shipmates in the Navy. There's just nothing like it. You're stuck with these people 24/7, and they really do become your family on deployment, because you're seeing these incredible places, and you're kind of going through a lot of stressful things as well together. And I think there's a bond there that you'll never have. I mean, I just listened to a podcast about Navy SEALs, and that's an extreme, but there's just nothing like that bond that you have with people that you've gone through adversity with.
Right. Someone, Doreen mentioned, the Navy sounds like a great place to be for those who are lost or disadvantaged in many ways. I would say that. Someone says, or Yasmin says, work with the schools and share this message. That's awesome. Yeah. So my question, I mean, you started talking about something, and it kind of brought a question to mind. As a woman in the military, how did you find that you were being received in other countries as a woman in the military?
A lot of them are just fascinated. I mean, they just, they don't have the same opportunities that we do. Some militaries, even if they do get to join, they're only going to be doing clerical or very low level work. And so they don't have the same choices that I do. But then again, I've also been to some other countries like, I'm trying to remember where, not Indonesia, but I want to say it might have been Nepal, but I met like one of the top ranking female 1-stars, and it was amazing. And she was just a fantastic lady. I'm still friends with her to this day. And so it's interesting to see the differences in ways that they treat women. It can be awkward when you go and you do an exercise with another country, because sometimes they might not be used to working with women, because they don't work with women in their country as much. But in our country, that is the norm. So they, I think in a way it's good, because they get that experience and that exposure to the fact that, the women in the military, they're just treated like, brothers and sisters in arms. So when they see that, and they see the camaraderie and the ways in which we do work well together, I think that elevates the consciousness of the other countries that we're working with, because like I said, that's so much of what we do is work with other partner nations and other countries. So I think that's definitely something that we all will learn more from one another just by working together.
Yeah. What changes have you seen in, you've been in a while now. So in that evolution from when you first started to how women were being treated in the military, or in the Navy specifically, I think you would speak to that specifically as opposed to now, where you're an officer and can see the difference in your transformation.
Well, I think that the Me Too movement has done a lot of good for not only the Navy, but for our society as a whole. I think that there are certain comments and, talk that was tolerated or wasn't called out as much. That is not, we can't just have someone have a centerfold on their wall, in a work center. We can't have the kind of banter that I was accustomed to in my maintenance office, when I was an E5. Those kinds of conversations are no longer acceptable, which they never should have been acceptable to begin with. It was just kind of the norm when I was more junior. And I even had my own little reckoning with that too, because when I saw all the people speaking up during Me Too, we had an army, a very high profile army, Vanessa Gillian. She was I think an army sergeant in Texas who was murdered. And before she was murdered, they said that she had been sexually, or her family had said that she'd been sexually harassed. And that started a floodgate with a lot of women speaking up and saying, I am Vanessa. And there was a hashtag about it.
Yeah.
And, I'll be honest with you, Chadwick, I struggle with that because, I was so kind of used to some of the ways in which people would talk. And I just never thought much of it. And I thought, well, why don't they just, why is this such a big deal?
Right.
And I had my own kind of reckoning with that to realize that no, it's not okay. And that kind of talk and that kind of language, it demeans women and it intimidates them from wanting to, aspire to higher levels of authority and responsibility. So I definitely think it's amazing what the younger people are doing these days to speak up and to speak out. And it's just incredible. And I'm so happy that there's more. The grooming standards are changing to making it so that you don't have to wear your hair back like this in a very bun all day. They're making uniforms more like flight suits for women who are pregnant, so that they don't have to wear something different in the office. So they're doing a lot of really what I think are positive changes for women right now, especially in the Biden administration. It's been great to see the advances, but for women in the military, not just the Navy, but the military as a whole.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, what I found awesome about what you just shared is the fact that you thought that the culture that was established before was okay, because a lot of people did. And you challenged yourself and you were able to have that difficult conversation. And I think, certainly I've had some conversations with some people with similar with the Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement, that there are some things that people just thought, okay, what's the big deal? But when they see the history and understand the history behind it, and not afraid to have the uncomfortable conversation, then you're going to see progress. But until people are willing to accept that, something may not be right here, and maybe we should listen and we should have that conversation, then, that's when change really starts to happen. And that's, thank you so much for sharing that. One more question. So if you were to say something to your viewers now, or my viewers now, you're only seeing a few of them here, but I'm sure a lot of them back on YouTube or however else they're logging in that we can't view. What would you say to them is your next step? What's the next step, and what would you change about the military if you could?
Oh, that's a tough one with what I would change, because I'm very happy to see where things are going, because I believe that although progress is incremental and slow and one step forward, three steps back, I think we continue to inch forward and we become better as an organization as a whole. And so I think that we're on a very good track with the military, and as far as I can tell, I think that we're moving in a positive direction. So I can't really think of anything particularly that I would like to see changed. I think that all the initiatives that they've talked about, and this is my personal opinion only, not, as a public affairs officer, of course.
Yeah.
I do like the idea that the sexual assaults cases might, or I think it's harassment as well, but I know it's assault, might be taken out of the chain of command. And I know there's some congressional movements for that, because it's a little bit of a conflict of interest when somebody's own, commanding officer or whatever, and they know all the people involved, for them to decide whether or not to prosecute or how those cases work. So I know there's been a lot of movement on that end, and I think that's a good thing. But other than that, I just would like to see the military embrace the diversity groups and the affinity groups, which they really are, as far as I can tell. There's been DOD had a whole list of recommendations to increase diversity. And so I'd like to see some of those recommendations be implemented, which, like I say, they probably already are. We just did a round of extremism training. I got to lead the extremism training for my command, and I wish that that's not just a one-time thing. So that's my hope, is that when we have this extremism training, it really was a conversation about getting to know your coworkers better and what their biases are. And it was fascinating. I mean, we brought in a guy who was a hate crimes expert from the Norfolk Police Department. We brought in an NCI, Naval Criminal and Investigative Services investigator. And, you know, it's a very sensitive issue for many people. And we had people on all sides. Some people thought, oh, we shouldn't be doing this. Why are you doing this? Why do you even care about putting this together? And then we had people that were like, oh my gosh, this is so important. We need to be discussing this. And I'm very proud to say that afterwards, I had people tell me it was the best stand down they've ever attended. And it's because I took it seriously. You know, I learned about the hate groups. I watched a Frontline documentary about it. And so what I really just want to see is that the military continue to embrace the diversity initiatives that they're already embracing, and that we continue to promote inclusive workforces, because that's the only way we're going to see more women flag officers, more women general officers. And it would just be nice if one day I look up at my chain of command, which won't happen in my time, and I see a balance of women and men. I don't see that now. And it's like I said, it's not going to happen for me, but maybe for the younger kids that are joining the military in their 20s, they'll one day look up and they're going to see all different types of people. And I don't just mean gender either. I mean race, I mean culture, because that's where the best ideas happen, from people who don't always come from the same place.
Sure. Thank you so much. It was great chatting with you, and thank you so much for sharing your vision. Thank you for sharing your experience, your life, and just your story with us. It's been awesome, and I'm sure some of our viewers today must have taken away a lot. If not the younger ones, well, perhaps their parents will know that, you know, this woman brought some smoke tonight, and she really gave us some valuable information that can be transferable to just about anyone. So thank you again. And we'll talk to you in a minute and backstage, but let me just address the audience for a second. So Makisha, thank you. So for all those who joined me tonight, and those who really tuned in and paid attention to what Teresa had to say, you'll find that there's so many nuggets in there that she shared. You know, yes, it's the military in the US. She is an American citizen, but for tonight, you know that information is transferable to Canadian or wherever you are joining me from tonight. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time. Remember, this show is sponsored by Hookshot Media Productions. Thank them for making us look good tonight, and good night, everyone. Be safe.